Imagine waking up in a small town in 1840. You open the shutters and the sun is already climbing above the hills to the east. The church bell rings. Not because someone decided it should ring at this particular minute, but because the sexton looked at the sundial in the square and knew. It is noon here, in this town, on this hill, on this specific curve of the earth. Time was not a number agreed upon by committees. Time was the sun, and the sun was yours. That world is gone, and most of us have never stopped to ask what exactly we buried along with it. Before the railways changed everything, every city in the world kept its own solar time. Bristol was 10 minutes behind London. Pittsburgh ran 29 minutes behind Philadelphia. Hundreds of cities, hundreds of clocks, each one synchronized not with a distant authority, but with the sky directly overhead. When the sun reached its highest point above your town, it was noon. Simple, biological, true. Then came the trains. Suddenly, a locomotive departing from one city and arriving at another had to navigate a cascade of incompatible local times. Railroad companies began printing schedules that listed multiple times for the same departure, London time and local time side by side, like two languages that refused to translate into each other. It was chaos. Practical, logistical, economic chaos. And so, in the name of efficiency, an extraordinary decision was made. We would abolish local time entirely. In 1847, British Railways adopted Greenwich Mean Time across their entire network. By 1880, it became the legal standard for all of England. In 1883, American railroads divided the continent into 4 clean time zones. By 1884, delegates from 41 nations gathered in Washington, D.C., and divided the entire Earth into 24 standardized slices, each one exactly 15 degrees of longitude wide, each one a clean, rational hour apart from its neighbors. The world had been synchronized, and something ancient had been quietly switched off. To understand what we lost, you have to go back much further than the railways. You have to go back to stone. Stonehenge, on Salisbury Plain in England, was constructed over thousands of years, beginning around 3000 BCE. Its massive sarsen stones are not arranged randomly. They are precisely aligned so that during the summer solstice, the rising sun shines directly through the heel stone and illuminates the central altar. This was not decoration. This was a calendar built in rock, a machine for measuring the precise moment when the Earth reaches a particular point in its orbit around the sun. Newgrange, in Ireland, is older still. Constructed around 3200 BCE, it predates Stonehenge by centuries and the Egyptian pyramids by half a millennium. Inside its passage tomb, there is a roof box, a deliberate architectural feature positioned so that on the winter solstice, and only on the winter solstice, sunlight penetrates the entire length of the passage and floods the inner chamber with golden light for exactly 17 minutes. The builders of Newgrange did not have written language. They did not have mathematics as we understand it. But they understood time, local time, biological time, the time written in the angle of the sun above their particular piece of land, with a precision that took our civilization's best archaeologists decades to decode. The Temple of Karnak in Egypt is a city of temples built over 2,000 years. Its great hypostyle hall is oriented so that the setting sun on the winter solstice aligns perfectly with the sanctuary's central axis, flooding the innermost Holy of Holies with light. The Pyramid of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza was built so that during the spring and autumn equinoxes, the shadows cast by its terraces create the illusion of a serpent descending the north staircase, a spectacle that lasts for several hours and was almost certainly tied to the agricultural calendar of the Maya. The temples at Abu Simbel in Nubia were cut so deep into the cliffside that the rising sun on the anniversary of Ramses II's coronation penetrates 65 meters into the mountain and illuminates the four seated figures inside. These were not curiosities. These were instruments. For thousands of years, the most important buildings humanity constructed were giant clocks, calibrated not to an arbitrary standard, but to the specific coordinates of the ground beneath them. Architecture was a form of listening to the sky, listening to the rhythm of light as it moved across a particular latitude, a particular valley, a particular hill. Now look at the building where you work. Does it know what month it is? The shift from solar to standardized time did not just change how we read clocks, it changed our bodies. Every living organism on Earth evolved under the same fundamental condition, the cycling of light and darkness, driven by the rotation of the planet. For billions of years before artificial light, before alarm clocks, before shift work, life on Earth entrained itself to the local solar cycle. Your heart rate, your cortisol levels, your body temperature, your digestion, your immune function, your sleep architecture, all of it rises and falls according to a roughly 24-hour internal clock called the circadian rhythm. And this clock is not set by a central authority. It is calibrated every single day by light entering your eyes. Specifically, by the light of your local sun, rising at your local latitude, at your local longitude. Here's the problem. A person living in Detroit, Michigan is technically in the same time zone as a person living in New York City, but Detroit sits significantly further west. Solar noon in Detroit occurs almost 40 minutes later than solar noon in New York. Under natural solar time, a Detroit resident's body would be waking, eating, working, and sleeping on a schedule that respects this 40-minute difference. Under Eastern Standard Time, they are forced to synchronize with a clock calibrated for a city hundreds of kilometers to their east. This is not a minor inconvenience. Study after study in the emerging field of circadian biology shows that chronic misalignment between social time and solar time, what researchers call social jet lag, is associated with elevated rates of obesity, cardiovascular disease, depression, and metabolic disorders. A landmark 2012 study by Till Ronenberg and colleagues found that social jet lag is so widespread that the majority of the Western population is living in a state of mild chronic sleep deprivation, their bodies perpetually confused by a clock that does not match their biology. We are all, in a very real sense, permanently jet-lagged in the time zones of our own homes. And this is before we even discuss artificial light, the second great disruption. The human eye contains specialized photoreceptors called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, which are particularly sensitive to short-wavelength blue light. These cells communicate directly with the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus, the master clock of the brain, and their primary function is to signal it is daytime and suppress the release of melatonin, the hormone that initiates sleep. Blue-enriched artificial light, which floods our screens, our office buildings, and our LED streetlights, activates these cells at all hours. Our brains receive the message, "It is midday," at 11 o'clock at night. The ancient builders of Newgrange understood something that our civilization forgot in the space of a century, that light is not just illumination. Light is information. Light is timing. Light is the signal by which every cell in your body knows where it is in the cycle of existence. There is a question that runs beneath all of this, and it is uncomfortable. What did people feel, not just biologically, but experientially, when they lived in genuine synchrony with the light of their place? When the clock in the square was set by the sun directly overhead, and the bells that rang marked not an administrative hour, but a solar event. When the farmer rose, not because a phone alarm told him to, but because the light of his specific valley, filtered through the specific hills to his east, reached his specific threshold of wakefulness. We have very little record of this inner experience, precisely because no one thought to document what was ordinary. But we have fragments. Medieval monks structured their entire day around the canonical hours: matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline, each tied not to clock time, but to the quality of light, and each accompanied by specific prayers, specific states of attention, specific modes of consciousness. The Japanese concept of ma, a word with no direct English equivalent, meaning something like the pregnant pause between things, is embedded in a culture where temporal awareness was traditionally calibrated to natural cycles, not industrial schedules. Indigenous calendars around the world, from the Hopi to the Lakota to the Aboriginal Australians, do not divide time into identical units marching in a uniform line. They describe time as seasonal, qualitative, located. This time of year, in this place, carries this particular quality of light and life. These are not romantic fantasies about a simpler past. They are evidence of something real, that the human mind, evolved over hundreds of thousands of years of living in direct relationship with local light cycles, may have capacities for temporal awareness, for sensing where one is in the rhythmic pattern of day, season, year, that our current mode of life systematically suppresses. The question your video asked about sound was this: what was happening inside the resonance that we no longer experience? The question about time is the same and equally unanswerable, which is perhaps the point. What happens inside a mind that wakes with the light of its specific latitude? What quality of attention becomes available when the clock in the square marks not an administrative fiction, but an astronomical fact? What does a body feel like when it has never experienced social jet lag, when every cell in it agrees without argument about what time it is? We have traded this, traded the granular, local, embodied experience of time for the extraordinary coordination that makes global civilization possible. The trains run, the markets open, the video calls connect. These are not nothing. The trade-off was real and the gains were real. But so was the loss. Somewhere in the genetic memory of every person watching this, there is a body that knows the angle of the sun and the length of the shadow and the quality of the light at this hour, in this season, at this latitude. A body that was never confused about what time it was, because time was not a number. It was the world, seen from exactly where you stood. We standardized the world. We synchronized the clocks. We built a global civilization that runs on the same 1900 seconds per minute, 60 minutes per hour, 24 hours per day, from pole to pole and sea to sea. And somewhere in that achievement, quietly, without ceremony, without anyone deciding it should happen, we lost the particular silence between the bells.